Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into the wild, surprisingly varied reality of exactly how our ancestors ate before farming was even a thing. You know, we often think of ancient history as this simple, straight-line timeline, but the truth is, the relentless pursuit of calories shaped absolutely everything about us. We're talking from the way we walk, to the way we socialize, right down to the clothes on our backs.
Okay, do me a favor. Mentally open your fridge right now. Take a good look around in there. How many of those exact foods existed 10,000 years ago? If you're picturing bread, cheese, rice, or pasta, well, you might be surprised to learn that almost none of it was on the menu for early humans. For nearly the entire span of human existence, our ancestors relied on a completely different set of resources to survive.
For decades, we've been fed a very specific myth. You know the one, the dramatic image of man the hunter, this muscle-bound caveman dragging a massive mammoth home. Well, scratch that, because it's badly incomplete. When researchers actually studied surviving hunter-gatherer societies, they found that roughly 60 to 80% of a group's calories came from gathered plants, tubers painstakingly dug out of the dry ground, and yes, insects. While meat was certainly celebrated, it was actually the plants and bugs that were the true, reliable staples keeping people alive day in and day out.
To put this into perspective, think about our timeline. For over 97% of human history, nobody planted a single seed on purpose. 97%. Modern humans have been around for roughly 300,000 years, but farming, that's only about 10,000 years old. That massive 97% gap means our ancestors couldn't just rely on predictable crops. They had to be incredibly clever opportunists, adapting their diet entirely to whatever the local land happened to provide.
So, rather than just eating lean muscle meat, our ancestors were actually chasing fat for its dense calories. Believe it or not, a handful of termites can contain more protein per gram than beef. But even more crucially, archaeologists have found ancient stone tools that were used specifically to crack open long animal bones. They weren't just after the lean meat on the outside, they wanted that fatty, calorie-dense bone marrow sealed inside. Fat, not lean protein, was the ultimate prize.
But why did we need all that dense fat? Well, the answer is our incredibly expensive brains. Around 2 million years ago, the human brain began this dramatic size increase. And your brain is a total energy hog. Even at rest, it burns through roughly 20% of your daily energy, despite being just a tiny fraction of your overall body weight. That relentless evolutionary pursuit of dense calories, like marrow, was strictly required just to keep the lights on in our expanding minds.
Finding fat wasn't enough, though. We had to unlock its full potential. And the invention of cooking was a total game changer. As primatologist Richard Wrangham suggests in his cooking hypothesis, heat breaks down tough plant fibers and denatures proteins. So what does this mean? It means our guts used far less energy digesting, effectively doubling the net calories our ancestors could pull from the exact same piece of food. This single technological shift freed up the energy needed to fuel our massive brain growth and literally reshaped our anatomy, giving us weaker jaws and much shorter digestive tracts.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that we didn't just change our diet. Our relentless pursuit of food physically engineered our bodies. We became the ultimate foraging machines through a stack of incredibly powerful traits. We stood upright, which helped manage heat by reducing the sun hitting our backs. We lost our fur and developed millions of sweat glands, which allowed us to literally run down prey in the midday heat while other predators had to rest. And of course, we freed our hands, not just to make tools, but to carry precious food back to our families.
Now, walking upright on two legs wasn't just about freeing our hands to carry resources. It was a matter of sheer survival math. Human walking is incredibly efficient. When scientists measured it, they found that walking on two legs cost roughly 4 times less energy per unit of distance than a chimpanzee walking on its knuckles. When your next meal is miles away across a hot savanna, being able to search for it using a fraction of the calories is a massive, game-winning evolutionary advantage.
But as you can guess, that incredible adaptation created a brand new problem. We shed our fur so we could sweat while hunting in the hot African savanna, but when early humans followed food sources and migrated into brutally cold Ice Age climates, well, a hairless primate was in serious trouble. We couldn't exactly just grow the fur back. Instead, we had to invent tailored clothing as a technological workaround. We used bone needles 40,000 years ago to stitch animal skins into fitted, insulating garments that trapped warm air right against our skin.
You might be wondering, since clothes rot away over thousands of years, how do we know exactly when this happened?
While scientists had to look at a kind of gross, itchy source to date this invention: lice. See, humans have head lice and we have body lice. But body lice can only survive if there's external fabric to live in. By using a genetic molecular clock, researchers found that these two species of lice split apart between 83,000 and 170,000 years ago. That genetic split is the permanent record of exactly when our ancestors started wearing clothes to survive the elements.
As you can see on this timeline, this ancestral menu wasn't built overnight. Our relationship with food and drink goes back millions of years before farming even existed. 10 million years ago, we see mutations for alcohol processing. 3 million years ago, we stood upright to forage. 2 million years ago, cooking fueled our brains. And 13,000 years ago, we began deliberately brewing beer. Our modern dietary habits are built on a very, very ancient foundation.
Let's zoom in closely on that first timeline event. Long before happy hours and trendy bars, our ancestors actively sought out naturally fermenting fruit on the forest floor. According to the drunken monkey hypothesis, primates evolved a strong attraction to the smell of alcohol simply because it reliably signaled that precious sugar and calories were available nearby. We weren't looking to get a buzz. We were just looking for high-calorie, overripe fruit to keep us alive.
And to handle this, our bodies adapted in a huge way. A specific genetic mutation roughly 10 million years ago altered our ADH4 enzyme. Suddenly, our primate ancestors became 40 times more efficient at metabolizing ethanol than the primates that came before them. Our bodies were chemically hardwired and primed to safely process alcohol millions of years before anyone had the faintest idea what fermentation actually was.
Fast forward to 13,000 years ago, and we start seeing intentional brewing. Evidence from stone mortars in Rakafet Cave suggests a fascinating theory called the beer before bread hypothesis. It proposes that the very earliest steps toward farming and domesticating grains might not have been driven by a desire to bake bread for food at all, but rather by a craving to deliberately brew a primitive, intoxicating beer.
And listen, this early brewing wasn't just a recreational luxury for our ancestors, it was a critical survival tool. Anthropologists point out that shared drinking lowers inhibitions and triggers endorphins, fostering intense social cohesion and trust in small groups, where cooperation was literally a matter of life or death. Plus, the accidental process of fermentation killed harmful bacteria, providing a much safer hydration alternative in a world where untreated water sources carried genuine deadly risks.
All right, moving on to our next section. When the kitchen was closed, surviving a week of rain.
Picture it, a week of non-stop rain. For highly active hunter-gatherers, this meant hunting and foraging were just impossible. But instead of miserably waiting it out in the dark, early humans swung into a coordinated survival plan. They engineered shelters to protect their fires, carefully banking coals. They used this forced downtime for essential group maintenance. We're talking repairing spears, weaving cordage, and sharpening blades. They engaged in physical grooming to reinforce alliances, and they filled the psychological space by creating rich social narratives, telling stories by the fire, and even painting the incredible cave art we still marvel at today.
Think about the last time bad weather trapped you indoors for a few days. You probably cleaned out a closet, finally called an old friend, or tinkered with a hobby, right? That modern instinct to fix things and connect when you're stuck inside isn't born of boredom. It's actually an ancient, patient rhythm that your ancestors relied on to survive and prepare for the next hunt every single time the sky refused to clear.
Okay, let's head into our final section. Modern Echoes, our ancient biology today.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to consider how this ancient evolutionary menu dictates our lives right now. We live in a world of constant, predictable abundance, but our biology strictly remembers the boom and bust cycle of the savanna. Your intense cravings and instinct to gorge on rich, fatty, or sugary foods made perfect survival sense when calories were unpredictable and scarce. It was a literal survival blueprint. It only becomes a liability today because we're surrounded by endless calories that our ancient hardware is screaming at us to consume immediately.
And this goes all the way down to a microscopic level. Our ancestors were absolute opportunists, eating well over 100 different plant and animal species across a single year based on whatever they could find. Compare that to today's modern gut, which relies heavily on narrow, repetitive staples like wheat, rice, corn, and soy. Our gut bacteria still respond far better to the wild, unprocessed diversity of our ancestral diet than to the narrow, processed crops we eat today.
So the next time you feel guilty about pacing the floor when stressed, craving a rich, fatty snack after a long day, or wanting to gather with friends over a drink, ask yourself a question. Are you flawed? Or are you just beautifully, perfectly engineered for a world that no longer exists?